Hey Most Amazing Top 10 family, I'm your host Che Dorena and welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. Warning signs often go ignored. Red flags, no one pays attention to them. Looking back, it can seem easy to explore how many things could have been done differently. After all, there's no accounting for lack of preparedness for disasters that haven't even happen yet, or even some cases people take precautions that prevent even worse outcomes. But there are plenty of examples of catastrophes that in retrospect could have been less disastrous if people heeded what they had known ahead of time. And that is why I'm bringing you today's list of top 10 scary disasters that could have been prevented. For all of you at home who might be looking to grab some merch, you should check out the link in the description below and use the offer code MA10. That will give you $5 off, and that means you can grab a shirt for $10, which is a sweet deal. And stick around until the end of this video because I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts, which you guys love so much. Remember, if you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. I pick new pets every day, so if you don't get picked one day, you message back another day. And without taking any longer, let's get into this list. Coming in at number 10 is the 1989 San Francisco earthquake. 26 years after the Loma Prieta earthquake, a 7.1 magnitude trembler that shook North Carolina in October of 1989. The quake, dubbed the big one, that coincided with the beginning of Game 3 of the World Series, which pitted Oakland against San Francisco. Thankfully, tons of people were safely nestled inside their homes and bars watching the series, yet 63 people died in the earthquake, most of them in the 1.25-mile-long section of a double-deck Cypress freeway. It was like something out of a Godzilla movie, one firefighter told the San Francisco Chronicle on the day of the earthquake. Could this have been prevented? Officials knew that the freeway could not withstand an earthquake of that size, and they most certainly knew that an earthquake of that magnitude was a real threat. Or, as the New York Times wrote in the aftermath, if not, they should have known or at least suspected. And if they did suspect it, then why weren't the proper measures taken to strengthen the freeway or close it down? Engineers told the Los Angeles Times that state highway officials had failed to take adequate steps to strengthen the roadway overpass after the 1971 earthquake that came through and killed 58 people in the San Fernando Valley. Our vote: this could have been prevented. At number 9 was the 2007 Minneapolis bridge collapse. For nearly 2 decades before a sudden bridge collapse in Minneapolis killed 13 people and injured 145 others in 2007, officials at multiple levels of government knew that the I-35 Mississippi River Bridge was structurally deficient, yet they relied on patchwork repairs and stepped-up inspections that unraveled amidst a thunderous plunge of concrete and automobiles, US Today reported at the time. Obviously, State Bridge engineer Dan Dogan told reporters something went terribly wrong. Our vote: this could have been prevented. Up next at number 8, one of the most alarming aspects of Hurricane Katrina's devastation of New Orleans in 2005 was the fact that the city's vulnerabilities had been well documented and understood. The city's main newspaper had devoted several days to coverage of a special series called Washed Away, 3 years before Katrina hit. In the series, reporters said that officials were tempting fate by failing to address the weakness in the levees meant to protect New Orleans, and cautioned that it was only a matter of time before South Louisiana takes a direct hit from a major hurricane. Our vote: you can't prevent this in good faith. You can't stop a hurricane from coming through, but if they had taken the proper measures, there would have been way less people injured and killed in this hurricane. Coming at number 7, we have the Fukushima nuclear disaster. On a fateful day in March of 2012, a tsunami triggered by a powerful earthquake swept through Fukushima's nuclear power plant, causing 3 of the 6 reactors to melt down, resulting in the worst nuclear incident since Chernobyl. Despite risk posed by tsunamis to nuclear power plants being very well understood and stringent preventive standards in place by Japan's Nuclear Regulatory Commission, those standards were simply not followed leading up to the incident. A report issued by Japan's parliament referred to the disaster as man-made because while it was obviously impossible to stop an earthquake or predict that it was going to happen, the nuclear accident could have been easily avoided. Coming at number 6, we're bringing you the single worst marine oil spill in history. The sinking of the Deepwater Horizon rig claimed 11 lives and resulted in the ocean floor, gushing out crude oil for almost 3 months. When all was said and done, nearly 5 billion barrels of oil had been deposited into the Gulf of Mexico, and it didn't take long to ferret out the root of the cause of the disaster: lax management by BP Oil, who owned the well and caused the spill due to a series of simple oversights. A lengthy report by the National Oil Spill Commission identified 9 separate management decisions that saved the company time and or money that could have been contributing factors, as well as, the most frustrating, a culture of complacency among management and the unwillingness to adhere to world-class safety standards. Ready to get even more mad, BP had an engineer on board of the rig whose job it was to interpret this kind of data, the kind of data that would have effectively prevented this tragedy altogether. This was pretty much his sole purpose for being on board, yet BP employees chose to crunch data themselves. The engineer was never consulted, and the commission stated that if he had been, events likely would have turned out differently. Wow, talk about negligence. We're at the halfway point on the list with number 5. We got the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, in which the shuttle exploded moments after takeoff, traumatizing a nation of school children who were watching on live TV as the first teacher in space, Krista McAuliffe, perished along with 6 other crew members. The cause of the accident was determined by a faulty O-ring, which sounds innocuous enough. This particular O-ring helped seal 2 solid rocket fuel boosters, and when it was breached, the escaping gas was hot enough to burn a hole through the shuttle's external fuel tank. It exploded, taking the shuttle with it. This would seem like a fluke had NASA not ignored partial failures of the same O-ring on previous launches, or had been warned about the O-ring's susceptibility to cold weather. It was 36 degrees on the day of the launch. Our vote, this could have been prevented. At number 4, we have the Air France Flight 447 in 2009. The Airbus A330 is one of the most sophisticated and popular passenger planes in the modern aviation industry. It has downright futuristic autopilot controls, to the extent that once the path has been programmed, pilots only have to spend about 3 minutes manually controlling the plane, about 1.5 minutes during takeoff and during landing. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a double-edged sword. Part of a pilot's experience is knowing how to control the plane in all conditions, including adverse ones, like the ones that met Air France Flight 447 over the Atlantic on June 1st, 2009. Flying through a thunderstorm, the plane's speed sensor became clogged with ice and began relaying inaccurate information to the flight crew. It was determined in an investigative report by the French government that confusion reigned among the inexperienced crew, who seemed to have trouble looking past the automation they were accustomed to and not really able to continue with the old raw information that pilots used to depend on. Because of the clogged sensor, the autopilot eventually returned manual control of the plane to the crew, who failed to properly diagnose what was happening and stalled the plane. It crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 people on board. I mean, here's the thing, how do pilots get experience? So was this preventable? I mean, if they were flying the plane more, then they most likely would have known what to do in this situation. Finally, we're down to number 3 on our list of top 10 scary disasters that could have been prevented. In January 2013, a perfect storm of oversight and neglect combined with one excruciatingly stupid decision led to a fire that devastated the Kiss nightclub in Sao Paulo, Brazil, killing more than 230 people. It was one of the worst such incidences in the country's history, and the fact that the club was operating with an expired fire safety certificate is only the most obvious indicator that this should have never happened. The club was reported to have a capacity of 2,000 people, despite 1,300 being the maximum allowed occupancy for the square footage under Brazilian law. There were no working fire extinguishers or sprinklers or emergency lighting, nor were there clearly marked emergency exits, as evident by the fact that some panicked club goers tried to cram themselves into restrooms, thinking them to be exits. The stupid decision? The band that was playing that night decided to introduce pyrotechnics to this tinderbox. Now, where is Smokey the Bear when you need him? Coming at number 2 on our list is the 2008 cyclone Nargis. More than 100,000 people were killed in the aftermath of this cyclone, which made landfall in a low-lying region of Burma. The storm was considered one of those once in every 500 years kind of thing, as Jeff Masters, the director of meteorology at the website Weather Underground, told the Associated Press. And yet officials in the region were criticized for not doing more to warn the public once it became apparent how bad the storm could be. Officials agreed that an improved warning system and better communication from officials about the storm surge would have saved lives, but still couldn't have entirely prevented fatalities. It would have been impossible to evacuate the millions of people in time, especially along poor roadways from remote regions. Our vote on this this, again, you can't prevent the storm altogether, but if they had taken the proper safety precautions ahead of time, a lot of lives would have been saved. And the moment you've all been waiting for, number 1 on the list. Most of the disasters on this list played out over a relatively brief period of time, mostly weeks or months, some of them literally in a day. The scourge that came to be known as the Dust Bowl played out over the entire decade of the 1930s. It was in the heartland of America. It was during this time that thousands of East Coast dwellers began heading west in seek of relief from hardships brought on by the Great Depression. The key factor here is that the preceding years had brought uncharacteristically heavy rains. Few remember that after the Civil War, settlers passing through the area had continued straight through to the west coast because the land was practically uninhabitable. On some maps in the late 1800s, the area was referred to as the Great American Desert. The rains had brought heavy grass and plant growth to the area, giving the new settlers the mistaken impression that the area was suitable for farming, and farm it they did, or at least they tried. Plowing and plowing again, vast stretches of land had the moist topsoil eradicated, leaving only dry dirt and dust. And when the wind kicked up, this dirt and dust became a malevolent, deadly force. On the heels of a 10-year drought, these dust storms literally choked the life out of hundreds of square miles of land. Nobody knows how many people died due to starvation or illness due to respiratory problems and other diseases. The drought finally broke in 1939, just in time for World War II. Ooh, alright everyone, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and as promised, I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts. First off, we have Kira, who looks like the happiest little kitty of all time. Look at that kitty, I love her so much. Then we got the long girl Allie. She looks very svelte and ready to impress everyone. After that we have Jegs, who's all bundled up. Look at him, I'm so jealous of how comfy he looks. Next we have Honey, who is doing a very nice little stand for everyone to see. Look at how talented she is. And to close it out, we didn't get a name for this kitty, they just call him Fat Boy, so I'm bringing you this big thick one to close out this video. Alright everyone, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, I would love it if you could like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell. Until next time, I've been your host, Chernobyl, and try to stay away from some disasters. I know that's hard right now. Bye.